Hello, Conscious Crew. It is your host, Davion. I am here to bring you the second interview regarding a alleged victim who came forward, who wanted to tell her story and her experience regarding former blogger, alleged extortionist, Sir William Mccray. Kimberly initially told me that she had made contact with Mr. Mccray in the comment section of one of my YouTube videos. We then exchanged through email, and the rest is obviously history. There is a recorded conversation that you will hear me and Mrs. Pollard discuss. That audio conversation between her and Sir William Mccray will be in my Patreon, so you guys make sure to look for the audio. It will be listed and described, and she will explain the context of that conversation, the timeline, etc. She also sent me her initial letter to Mr. Mccray when she decided that she wanted to go forward and tell her story, and to also bring awareness to her relationship to a bishop at the time when she was underage. And there's also a series of screenshots between Mrs. Pollard and Mr. Mccray. She will also explain the context of those receipts to you in the interview. All testimonials are provided by first-hand accounts by victims themselves. All things said in these interviews are alleged, but are also corroborated with screenshots, audios, etc. This particular interview exposes the way and the mentality of Mr. Mccray and how he weaponizes his platform and how he manipulates victims. And this young woman is going to give you further insight into that. Let's proceed.
Mrs. Pollard, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing wonderful. First, I want to thank you for being honest and willing to come forward. Me dealing with so many victims in this case and so many people who have encountered Mr. Mccray. Not everybody has had the audaciousness and the heart to speak up out of fear for retaliation. So I know how hard this can be. I know how intimidating this man has made himself to appear to be. So I just want to thank you for sharing your story. I want to thank you for trusting me with your story, and I want to thank you for being here tonight. So just want to give you that first and foremost.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I know this isn't your first time in the spotlight. Some people may be well aware already of who you are and how you kind of entered into the social arena. Can you tell us a little bit kind of about how you got here and what events led to your encounter with Mr. Mccray?
Okay, well, to make a long story short, I was involved in a situation with a bishop out of New Mexico. From the time I was 15, it was on and off for close to 20 years. Needless to say, I found my voice 20 years later after he made an inappropriate comment to my daughter, my 6-year-old daughter, telling her how sexy she looked. And that kind of opened my eyes, and I realized the situation that I was in had nothing to do with love, but it was a perversion on his part that started from when I was 15 years old. And so me wanting to free myself, I knew I had to expose myself, and unfortunately he was attached to the exposure. So I contacted, he was a bishop, or he still is a bishop with the Church of God in Christ. So I contacted whoever I could regarding the steps that I needed to take in order to file a complaint regarding this man. So that's pretty much how I got in contact with William Mccray. I had seen his blog, and the presentation looked amazing. It looked like he was really about his business, that he was, an advocate for people like me. And so I did reach out to him initially and gave him my entire story, was very transparent, and he called me a victim, and he said he wanted to help me. He had ties to the church. He was close to Bishop Blake, which is the presiding bishop of the Church of God in Christ. And so I trusted him. He gained my trust pretty quickly. And looking back, it was a very vulnerable time for me at that moment, but I trusted him because of what I had seen him display in his blog. And so from that, he wanted all the information that I could send to him regarding proving my case, and so that he could help me get this information to the correct people in the Church of God in Christ. And so I did that. We had an hour-long conversation over the phone, exchanged several text messages, and shortly after that, I started hearing things that he wasn't who he said he was, that he was, he's all about money. He gets this information, and he blackmails the person, the pastor or whatnot. And I didn't really believe it at first because I made a comment about it in one of our text messages, and he was like, no, I don't know where you got that from. And so I kind of dropped it, but it was proven to be very true. I reached out to him in March of 2016. He did not, he basically kept telling me that he was going to do my story, and he kept prolonging it, making excuses. But I believe during that time he was probably blackmailing the bishop, which I did hear that he had the bishop rent him a van at one of the meetings, and he kept the van for weeks, and so it costed him hundreds of dollars because he never took the rental car back. Like I said, this started in March, and so by the time he was really ready to release the story, which he initially told me he would release it on March 20th, he got in touch with me in October, November, basically wanting all the information because he now wanted to do the story because he felt like he had a story and this, that, and the third. But he only was doing that because the Daily Mail had got a hold of my story and they released it. And so once we had a phone conversation, and that phone call was recorded, and he began to tell me at this point that he was going to release the story, whether I gave him the information or not, but the outcome of how he wrote his story would be dependent upon what I gave him. And so he specifically told me if I gave him what he wanted, he would write the story in my favor, and if I did not assist him in giving him what he wanted, then he was going to write the story not in my favor. And so I chose to not give him the information, and so he wrote the story against me.
Okay, there's a lot there, so I kind of want to come back a little bit. Initially, what all was the information that you provided to him when you said that you gave him all of the information?
Well, I didn't give him all the information, but I gave him enough to prove, because he wanted, he was asking for pictures or text message conversations. And so everything that I would send him, he would come back and say, well, that doesn't prove anything. So I would look for something else that I had and send it to him until he basically was like, okay, this is what I need. And so initially I had sent him several videos of myself and this bishop as far as conversing or whatever. Okay. And I deleted them because they were on a Google Drive, and I ended up deleting them months later after I figured out who William really was. And so whenever the Daily Mail decided to run the story in November, that's when he was like, hey, I need the videos, I need everything, and I wouldn't send it to him again. Because I explained to him, you sat on this for 6 months, you acted like you were for me, but now you were actually against me. You're calling me every name in the book, but then you will come back as if you were an advocate. So literally in that phone conversation, I felt like I was speaking to multiple personalities, because he went from loving to angry, cussing, fussing at me, and then back to godly wisdom and whatever.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. What initially made you even reach out to William versus reaching out to the authorities? And how old were you by the time you had reached out to William?
That's a great question. This actually started, I reached out to William in 2016, but before any of that, I did go to the authorities, and I know a lot of people question that, but my daughter turned 6. She turned 6 February 21st, and that's when the bishop sent her that video. And so I went to the authorities 2 weeks later and reported it. So I reported it immediately. At first, I didn't report it because everybody was trying to convince me that, no, he may not have meant it that way. He was just playing with her. But in my head, I'm like, how do you, a 50-plus-year-old man, find a 6-year-old sexy? I mean, that's not even a play. That is mind-boggling. And so I couldn't rest about it. There was no peace about it. So I finally...
So for those who don't know, the video that you're talking about is a video where he was, on FaceTime with you, or?
It was a messaging app called Glide. And so it lets you send a 60-second video back and forth or whatever. And so that was pretty much our thing. We always did Glide because he did not live in the same state. And so on that date, as I stated, it was her birthday. And so she didn't have on a gown because I know people have questioned, well, why did you show your daughter on video in a gown? She had on a shirt, actually, it was like a tank top, and that was his comment. And so I did report it 2 weeks later. I still have the police report, and I did all of that because, number one, that's my daughter. Number two, I was silenced when I was 15 because nobody believed me, or 16 rather, whenever I first mentioned what he had done. And so I felt like I was silenced, but at the end of the day, I'm like, I'm not going to allow my daughter to be a victim. And so that's really what pushed me into mama bear mode. And so I was willing to do whatever it took. If that meant exposing myself, my sins, I was okay with that because at the end of the day, I knew my daughter was going to be safe.
Right. Okay. Now, I know listening to this, you guys are going to have a lot of questions because Miss Kimberly just said a mouthful. And I just want y'all to know this particular interview is not about her encounter with that pastor. The focal point here is the way that William Mccray handled her as a result of the experience she was having with this pastor. So I know you guys are going to kind of get really curious, get very questionable, but this particular interview, that is not the focal point, okay, you guys? So just continue to keep your ADHD on lock, and let's just stay focused here. So William Mccray now has the information. You have gone to the authorities. So initially, I'm just going to bypass that. He now has the information. You guys are now conversing. You did send me a series of screenshots, and I'm assuming that this dialogue took place kind of over the course of weeks, months between you and Mr. Mccray?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And then you said it wasn't until mainstream platform had got a hold of the story between you and this bishop?
Correct.
That then William Mccray, obviously being an attention whore and wanting to superficially be the first one to break things instead of actually holding to his integrity and his word to use his platform to help you, which he could have did long before the Daily Mail ever even decided to break the story, decided that he wanted to then press the gas only because a mainstream platform was about to pretty much break the story. At this point now, he's reached back out to you. He's told you, look, we got to press the gas right now. And then what happened?
Just to give the people a time frame, I reached out to him March. Daily Mail ran the story in November. And so that's when he wanted to push the gas, is in November. I referred him to my lawyers because by that time I had to retain counsel. And so and
that's because you had waited so long for him. He had not done anything. He had not made anything happen. So you went and did what you had to do.
Well, I didn't even reach out, just for the people. I didn't reach out to the Daily Mail. What happened was, which again, this was probably going to have to be a completely different interview, but just so that there's not too many holes. Basically what happened was before the Daily Mail even ran the story, I ended up having to retain counsel because this bishop in church, they wanted to put a gag order on me. And so I could not respond to the gag order myself. And so I had to retain counsel, and that was like in July or August. And so fast forward to, they ended up filing a lawsuit. And so once the lawsuit was published, I don't know how the Daily Mail got a hold of it, but they wrote a story based off of the actual lawsuit. They never got a statement from me. I didn't make any comments. My lawyers didn't make any comments. They just ran the story based off of what the actual lawsuit said. And so that was in November, and so that's when William Mccray started hitting me up on the phone. Basically, we need to talk. I need this information. Let's go. And for me, I felt like he was only doing that, number one, because he is an attention whore and because the Daily Mail is way bigger than he will ever be. And then he was not going to be able to blackmail this bishop for any money because at this point it's public. It's national, actually. And so, like I said, I wouldn't give him the information because at this point I said, okay, I don't trust you. I trusted you in the beginning. I was 1,000% transparent with you. I took ownership. Everything you could think of, I did it. And this is how you decided to treat me. And he apologized for it. He's very theatrical. He's a good actor. And so he apologized. How can we make it right? And there was I said, I accept your apology, but my answer is still no. I'm not going to move forward with you. And so that's when the threat came in. So
I had privy to the audio conversation, probably, I assume, the last conversation you and Mr. Mccray had. In this conversation, it could be heard where he's speaking to you basically about the ins and outs of how he's going to move forward with this. And his terms and conditions were, you either give me everything that I'm asking you for, and I, in return, I'm going to tell your story either way. He was adamant about the fact that he's going to put it out no matter what. But what he could do for you is, if you gave him everything that he needed, he would then write the story in your favor. Or if you didn't, he would write the story the way he did, and I want to quote him just to show how incredibly foul-mouthed and demonic and ridiculous this wig-wearing fool is. Or he would write it, and I quote, obnoxious exclusive, Church of God in Christ, Kojic Bishop James L. Keith Jones is being sued by a bipolar, paranoid, schizophrenic, broke church whore, Kimberly Pollard.
Right.
And he chose to write that story in that way because you refused to give him any more information or any more receipts, because he pretty much had already blew his opportunity with you, because you guys had already made contact months prior to November, and he pretty much played you like a fiddle. I know you also expressed to me that you also became very aware that what was going on between the month of March and I assume November is that William Mccray actually were using the receipts you had given him to help expose this bishop, who not only groomed you at 15 years of age because he's a child predator, but also now had started insinuating a grooming process toward your 6-year-old daughter, and that he was using all of your receipts to actually blackmail this bishop out of money and resources, and that's why he had you on ice.
Allegedly, of course.
Allegedly.
Let's put that out there because we don't want any drama. But if I could interject, the way that you quoted the title of his blog, he basically described himself.
Absolutely.
Because if I'm not mistaken, he's broke, homeless. I have a roof over my head. My car is paid off. I'm good over here.
Absolutely. Now, the blog is up. He's now running the story in favor of the bishop while still exposing him and you both, supposedly. When really you exposed yourself. You were the one who was forthcoming about everything, for one. You spoke to me and said that there was somewhat of a doxing involved as well, that your phone number, your address were leaked, that you had to change your phone number, etc.
I did. The day that, and I actually need to look, whenever he did the blog, actually, of course, I have a small group of friends that are very protective of me because they just are. And so they went in on him. They were like, hey, give us his number. Let me call him. Let me talk to him. Because he also had pictures of my daughter on his blog, and he was saying, her retarded-looking daughter. Like, he was very disrespectful. Wow. And I even asked him, you can leave the story up about me. I'll take that, but don't put my daughter out there like that.
Right.
I mean, she's the innocent party. Like, you don't have a heart if you're posting my child's picture. And so his response was, well, you're asking the church for money for her, so the world deserves to see your daughter. And I'm like, wow, you're evil. Wow. Like, she's a 6-year-old innocent baby. Like, and so I don't know, allegedly, I don't know that he leaked my information, but I do know after that story broke, literally 24 hours later, I changed my phone number. When I asked him, before I changed my number, I told him, quit contacting me. Mm-hmm. And he kept going back and forth. We kind of went back and forth, and finally he sent me a text message displaying my address. It actually wasn't my address. I had moved from that address. It was an old address, but just the fact that he thought that he was getting one over on me, I'm like, okay, this guy he's insane. He's crazy. Yeah. He blocked my IP address from his blog because, like I said, I had a group of friends. They were ready. They were commenting on his blog, basically trying to let the viewers know or the readers know, hey, he's lying. We have a recording of him basically saying that why he's writing the story this way. And so he would block their IP address every time. And so they were not able to release the truth. But at the end of the day, I knew this day would come. Like I always believe, if you stand on the truth is going to be left standing. When all the smoke clears, the truth is always going to be left standing. So here we are today.
Yeah. Now, with what you know about his business practices, now with what you know about his quote-unquote advocacy on behalf of those who have been abused in various ways, especially by way of the church, what was your motivation to come forward?
Regarding him?
Yes.
My motivation really is because, like I said, the truth needs to be heard. I wouldn't want anyone else to get entangled with him because that next person may not be as strong as me. Their skin may not be, and my skin wasn't as tough. So, I have him the credit for making my skin a little tougher because I'm able to take the criticism, but someone else may not be that way, and it may take them out. And so I would hate for him to earn a dime or a nickel at the expense of someone else's emotional distress, emotional damage. Like, that's not cool.
Yes.
And so if I can say or do whatever or share my story a million times and just help one person know who he is, it's all good. It's worth it. I'll do it.
Yeah.
I've been drugged through the media. I've been called every name in the book, so it doesn't bother me because I know who I am, period.
What has your attitude toward the church been like since this? Because here it is, you are in a very unique situation where you've been preyed upon and taken advantage of by a so-called man of God. Then you trusted another person who was in the church who was pretending to act on the best interests of victims and was also taken advantage of and manipulated for self-gain. Where has this left you? In your faith, in your relationship to the church? What would you say to young women who are in the church now, young 15-year-old girls who, have home churches and are participating in organized religion?
As far as where I am now versus 3 years ago, I was in a very dark place 3 years ago because I literally questioned everything about God, everything about what I was taught, everything that I read in the Bible, because I'm like, okay, God, you say you're loving, or this is what the Bible says, this is that and the third, but why am I in this situation? I understand we all sin, we all do our dirt or whatever, but I'm exposing myself. To me, I expose myself. I haven't been caught in anything. I'm freeing myself, but why is it that I feel like I'm paying for everything else? And so it took a minute for me to, I was very angry with God because I didn't understand it. Like, my family turned their back on me, my mother, it was all for the sake of church. Oh my God, I can't believe you're doing this to this man and this man of God and this, that, and the third. And I'm like, wow, so are these people that blind to where they cannot see this for what it really is? And so it took me a while to come out of that, and truth be told, I'm still coming out of that because I'm not very trusting. I feel like everybody has a motive now, and so I'm very protective. I keep my circle very tight. Like, my best friend, we've been best friends since we were 14, 15, and so it's very hard to penetrate my circle now because I do feel like, okay, why are you wanting to be my friend? Like, why do you want to converse with me? There has to be a motive, because even though you look good, smell good, you have a Bible in your hand or whatever, I just can't see past, from my experience. I'm like, there has to be a reason. So I'm learning to trust a little more, but it's hard. It is very hard.
Yeah. I know that we're kind of getting into that particular story, but I think that this all makes full circle. I want to ask you this. I've heard your interview on the Larry Reed Live. I also saw your initial letter and email to Mr. Mccray. I've seen how much responsibility you took in for your actions, and I've spoken to you privately and told you that I'm not sure how I feel about the term accountability as it relates to your situation, because you were 15 years old when this very mature man decided to prey upon you as a young woman. So with you also utilizing the term, I took responsibility for my part in this. I take responsibility for partaking in this relationship with this man of God. Is that how you would also feel about other 15-year-old girls? Would you, another Kimberly Pollard in this situation, like, do you blame them for?
Oh, man. No, I would not blame them. But I think for me, it's just one of those, I've always been one to take ownership of anything that I've done. And so I think, and I have a counselor, and I know people, especially in the Black community, it's so taboo to go see a counselor or whatever, but my counselor has helped me unpack so much regarding this situation and just life in general, and she gets on me the same. She's like, no, you cannot take accountability. You were a child. Like, your thought process was created and molded by this man. And so I think maybe part of that is just, I don't know, I cannot get away from that. And maybe because it happened for so long, for so many years, because I know people always question, well, why did you wait 20 years? Or why did you? And honestly, looking back, it took my daughter, for me to see it possibly happening to my daughter before my eyes were opened. Because I never would have thought that was a perverted situation. I never would have thought anything of it other than, oh, he loves me. Like, I've never felt this way. No one else has ever made me feel this way. But when those words were said about my daughter, even when he said he wanted to date her.
And you were much older by the time they were said to your daughter. You weren't a 15-year-old girl anymore at that point.
Exactly. And so it opened my eyes to see it for what it was. But then I'm like, okay, well, why didn't I see this before? Like, so this is kind of my fault for allowing this to, the manipulation. But like my counselor always says, like, your psyche is going to take a while for you to be completely healed, because your thoughts, everything that you know about quote unquote love, quote unquote relationships, was formulated in your mind at 15 by this adult man.
Yeah. I hurt for people like you. I don't agree that you were at fault. There's a reason why we call 15-year-olds teenagers. And it has to do with the state of consciousness that most teenagers operate in. I don't think you had the wherewithal, and you had the bandwidth to discern lust from love, predatorial behavior from kindness and affection. I don't think you would have known those things. And to be honest, most of us have never been raised up to identify a predator, to identify the variables and the factors, when someone is preying on us. So most of us would have naturally been naive in your predicament. And I really hate that you had to have that experience. And I hate that a part of you is carrying around that guilt. I'm even more infuriated that someone who you trusted to bring remedy and reconciliation and justice to such a matter re-injured and reopened something that's already complicated, complex, and painful to begin with. And I just can't imagine. I cannot imagine. For those who are being taken advantage of, those who are being sexually assaulted in the church, now that you have had an experience initially with trusting a blogger, and I know that we're having a big conversation in society right now regarding, first of all, I want to speak to something that you said prior, where you said people, criticize you for how long it took I want to say this. Anybody who studies psychology, anybody who is listening to therapists and psychologists who specialize in sexual abuse and sexual trauma will tell you that most victims of sexual assault don't even come forward at all. And it is very common that when they do, they don't come out about their sexual trauma and abuse until decades and decades later. Maybe sometimes up until their dying bed is when they finally confess to, to having such an experience. And so this whole victims taking whatever amount of time they take to finally come forward is a lot more common than people could ever imagine. I have aunts and I have a mother who also experienced sexual abuse and trauma, and they did not open up about their experiences that happened to them as little girls until they was well into their 40s and late 50s. Mm-hmm. So this is something that is extremely common. I don't believe in victim shaming and victim blaming because we are too complex as human beings to work in these black and white ways. So it seems obvious to the naked eye to somebody who hasn't been abused that, it would be obvious. Somebody touch you, somebody, whatever, you immediately do something about that. That's just not how things typically work in all actuality, especially when people are building a relationship with you. They're building closeness with you. This was a man of God, so to speak, and this was somebody who you had knew for quite some time, and the rapport had been developing. So that's a whole nother thing. I also want to say that now, since you've had an experience with a blogger, would you encourage people, because we know we are experiencing the King Jobs and the Larry Reed Live programs who are exposing the church, helping victims to expose the ills of the church. What would you say to victims about utilizing a blogger as a way to bring awareness? Would you tell them to do their research? Would you tell them to just stay away from utilizing the bloggers and just kind of stick with the law? Or what would your sentiments be?
No, my sentiment would be exactly number one, to do your research, because I feel like that's where I made a mistake. Did not do enough research regarding Mr. Mccray. And so I would definitely tell them, if this is the route that you're wanting to take, by all means, do your research. Research, and then make your decision. Because that's, like I said, that is the mistake that I made, because I think you bloggers are amazing, because I know you guys catch a lot of flack, y'all are just gossiping. You're reporting things that, number one, people don't want to talk about in the black church, which is why so much of that is going on in the church.
Yeah.
They just want to put a Band-Aid over it. They want to call the little girl fast, go sit down, hot tail. And I just, to put that out there, I was very quiet and reserved. I wasn't the one prancing around. That wasn't me. And so I would tell them, first, definitely research. And number two, open your mouth no matter what, because somebody is going to believe you. Somebody is going to believe you, and someone's going to help you. I mean, we've come so far now because so many more women are opening their mouths. Some, of course, are not telling the truth. That is what it is. But for the most part, there's a group of us out there that are going to continue to open our mouths and tell our stories, because this is our freedom. I've been in prison for over 20 years of my life. I'm free now. I'm walking in my freedom, and I'm like, if I can free another young lady or even another young man, I'm going to do that. So never stop talking, no matter what they tell you. I was given all kinds of threats. They're not going to believe you. I'll always have the upper hand. And, of course, when I was 16, I did shut up, because I was like, well, yeah, he's right. I'm a kid, and he's an adult. But now you cannot make me shut up. I will speak on this every chance that I get.
Yeah. Well, I thank God that you have not lost all your faith in those of us who are a part of this line of work. And I hope to God that you feel in your experience with me that I have handled you with integrity and handled you with respect and honor. And I hope that I can speak to the future of other personalities who have social media visibility and a platform as it relates to these type of scenarios and these type of experiences and being trusted, because I feel like it's important to honor you guys' experience and your testimonies. I know so many people are going to be inspired by your courage. I interviewed Bishop Matthews, and he's a grown, 50-year-old plus man who was still being preyed upon by Mr. William Mccray. And there are so many people who have come forward about their experiences of extortion with William Mccray. And so I think when people hear your story, it's going to encourage even more people to come out of hiding, to speak openly. You guys are using your voices. And like I said, this is one of the most courageous things that any victim can do, is utilize their voice. And you should never stop talking. These interviews are going to act as circumstantial evidence to help build upon something much bigger that is coming. That's why I really thank you. And in time, you're going to know in a very objective way just how valuable your testimony was. And I just really thank you for trusting me. I thank you for telling your story to me. I thank you for trusting in the Conscious TV audience with your story. I probably have one of the most compassionate audiences in the world. These are very clear-headed, metaphysically grounded individuals. They very spiritually minded, but they not so spiritually minded that they ain't no earthly good either. A very balanced audience. They've been very much so a believer of every victim's testimony so far. So I just really thank you, Kimberly. I had one other question for you. Okay. Before we wrap things up, what would you say to people who right now are humanizing William Mccray by feeling sorry for him? There are actually a very small minority of people, but they are there, and they actually feel sorry for all of the things that are happening to him. They feel sorry for him losing.
No, I will, because I feel sorry for him, but let me tell you why. Let me explain that. I feel sorry because I feel like at some point in time, somewhere, somebody has done something so traumatic to him that has caused him to become so numb. And so that's where I feel sorry for him, because I don't feel like he was born this way. I really think that something has happened to him. And so I think a lot of us are judging the fruit versus, okay, what's the root? Why are you acting like? What's going on? And so that's just the loving part of me. So I feel sorry for him in that area, but at the same time, I always say no one is exempt from the harvest of the seeds that we sow. I can sow good seeds and my harvest is good harvest. I can sow bad seeds and my harvest is bad. I have to deal with that. Point blank, period. The only thing I can do is pray for harvest failure, and maybe God will be gracious enough to not let my harvest from my bad seeds be as bad. But we all have to, no one is exempt from that. And so I feel like everything that he's dealing with, I don't even know everything that's going on with him because it's not my business, but it's from the seeds that he's sown. So he really has to look at that and deal with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think God will be gracious to a certain extent if he takes ownership for the stuff that he's done. And that's across the board. That's with everybody. I always say that. There's a difference. Yeah. If you take ownership, I was wrong, forgive me, I'm sorry. I believe God knocks some of the stuff off, but if we still continue in our pride and narcissism and just know I'm this, I didn't do anything wrong, I'm not going to admit it, then you're going to have a hard life. You're going to have it's going to be hard for you. And there's nothing that no one can do. You're going to have to deal with that.
The Bible promises 2 deaths for the wicked. 2 deaths. One is earthly and one is spiritual.
Yeah.
And it's that Bible that says that you reap what you sow, and I think you hit it on the nail. In the mystical community, we have a understanding of God's forgiveness, where those who seek God's forgiveness are those who receive God's forgiveness, and those who do not seek God's forgiveness are those who receive God's wrath. So forgiveness is always there for those who are in search of it, for those who are open to it, and for those who desire it. But as you just said, stuck in your ways, narcissistic, self-righteous, legalistic, Pharisaic in mind and in nature, then you leave yourself in a position to have to undergo a lot of math correction. And my mom used to tell me, you better correct it before the Lord does, because you don't want the Lord to do the correcting. So I've always been in the practice of paddling myself, because I don't want that paddling from my Father.
Thank you. Speak on it. Exactly.
Yes. Is there anything else that you would like to say as it relates to William Mccray? Or is there anything that you would like to say directly to him, because we know he's lurking and he's listening?
I don't know what I would say to him other than, God, get yourself together. Life is too short. Like, yeah, is it worth it? I guess that would be my question to him. Like, is it really worth it?
I thank you, Ms. Pollard, for your time and for your testimony. I thank you for the receipts that you sent to me as well. My audience will be able to find those receipts. I will label those receipts accordingly, and that is the text message exchange between you and William, your initial letter to William, and of course the last conversation that you and William had, where he pretty much gave you an ultimatum, and at that point you chose to make an executive decision that you felt within your best interest, and he retaliated accordingly. There was a lawsuit, I believe you mentioned as well.
Not regarding William. Like,
okay, got it.
He did his blog, my lawyers were, because when they got wind of it, obviously they knew what it was because they had the recording. But they figured he was already broke, and they figured that it would take more money out of our pockets to file the paperwork to sue him for something that he did not have. So
thank you, Ms. Pollard. I thank you for your time, and you continue to trust God, and you've been through a lot, and so it's understandable that healing is going to take time, but that healing is going to make full circle. You just continue to trust in the Lord. Even this was a sowing into your healing, because you're standing up for other people who are in your position, and all of that is going to return back to you full-fold. So I thank you, Ms. Pollard. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate my experience with you has been top-notch. Like, I appreciate my best friend. We were all a little concerned because, again, they're very protective, but I was like, no, I have a good feeling. I feel, I read people's energy a little better now, having gone through what I went through with,
We are going to make sure that if any other person plans on coming in the likeness, in the spirit of, in the mantle of Sister Mccray, that we wear him in that wig out in such a way that people would think twice about ever walking in his shoes again.
Honey, I'm going to be quiet. Okay, yeah.
Okay, all right. So thank you for your time, Ms. Pollard.
Thank you.
Godspeed and blessings to you and your daughter. Do you have anywhere the people can contact you, email or social media platform that you're comfortable with sharing in case anybody wants to reach out to you?
Yeah, I can give my email address. Social media is pretty private for the most part, but my email address is K as in Kim, my last name, which is Pollard, P as in Paul, O-L like Larry, L like Larry, A, R as in Richard, D as in David, the number 1, and then it's at mail.com, not Gmail, but mail. So K Pollard, the number 1, at mail.com.
Okay. Well, that information would definitely be in the description box below. You guys know where to find Ms. Pollard. Like I said, we thank you, and our prayers and our light and love is with you. And me and you will certainly be remaining in contact. And if Mr. Mccray has anything slick to say, then he will be coming through me to get to you.
I appreciate it.
So you just know that.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, you have a great night.
You too. You have a wonderful night, and thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
You guys heard it here first. You guys already know where you can find Miss Kimberly if anybody wants to reach out to her. We also encourage you to certainly go to law enforcement The church will more than likely not be a aid if you have been preyed upon sexually, or if you are being abused in any kind of way, psychologically, emotionally, and physically. The church will more than likely only traumatize you further. So we encourage you to definitely pursue the law. Be forthcoming with your trusted family members about what's happening, and make the best decisions for yourself. If you are going to utilize a social media platform, especially someone else's, a known blogger, a reporter, a journalist, then just also make sure that you do your research and that you discern your safety, and you discern God's word on a particular platform of your choice. So I leave you guys to your own thoughts. You can leave them in the comment section below. I know you guys will. And until next time, namaste.